I am based at the U.S. Consulate in Auckland, so just down here in Wellington for a couple of days, but it sounds like we will have someone based in Wellington within the next several months, so that will be a great advantage to have in this part of the country as well. If you do have any questions, my contact details will be at the end of the presentation, and hopefully you got my business card in the back table as well. I always like to start presentations by giving a little bit more information about myself to ease into it. Can anyone guess where I'm from? America. Any guesses in states? It's actually been in the news a lot over the last few weeks. Not for always good things. The first guess I always get is California, and I am not from California. So that's one down. Any other guesses? Name a state that you know. Pennsylvania? That's a great guess. Not from Pennsylvania. About an 8-hour drive from Pennsylvania.
West of that? Or northwest of that?
Yeah, west of that.
It's been in the news for the wrong reasons?
Yeah.
Right. What have we got, Idaho?
It starts with an I.
Iowa?
No.
Illinois?
No.
The other one.
Indiana?
Yes, Indianapolis. That's the city where I'm from, actually. So bang on. Indianapolis, Indiana is where I'm from originally, but I've been in New Zealand for about 6 years. So I came over on the working holiday scheme. So I traveled around, tried to live in Wellington for a while actually, but Wellington didn't have me at the time. So back up to Auckland I went, and I coordinated working holiday programs for a couple of years and helping New Zealanders find opportunities to work abroad in America and in Canada and in the UK and all over the world. So that was pretty great. And then I ended up at Trade Me and doing online advertising for a couple of years, and transitioned into this position last September. So being an American and going to a school in America, I can tell you a lot about my personal experience with the whole process and try to help you out as much as possible as well. So we'll talk more about that stuff later on, but we'll get going with the presentation itself. So why would you choose to study in America? There's lots of reasons, but when it boils down to it, there's really three that get people excited, and that's the flexibility, choice, and atmosphere. So in terms of flexibility, there are lots and lots of options, over 10,000 different program options for studying at the undergraduate level in America. You're spoiled for choice. It's really easy to decide to change your major or area of concentration partway through your studies. It's easy to transfer to a different institution partway through your studies. So that's the flexibility factor. In terms of choice, there are over 4,700 accredited institutions in America, which is a whole heck of a lot. So that's how we can help you with navigating all those options for you. And there's a whole lot of diversity as well. So people often like to say that every different state in America is almost like a different country. So they all have their own cultures, specialty food, specialty types of music. People talk a little bit differently. So there's a whole lot going on all across America. Just a show of hands, how many of you have actually been to America before? Yeah, a good few of you. That's great. So I have this map here, and I like to show this because, well, actually I'm going to ask you, what do you think the dots on this map represent?
Dots.
Dots. It's a good. Population was the guess. Not quite. Any other guesses?
Is it to do with universities?
Yes, kind of. It's not the actual representation of universities, but these dots actually represent New Zealand students that are currently studying in America. So it does it by concentration, so you can see that there's a lot of New Zealand students currently studying in Hawaii, There's a whole lot of them in California, and then again on the East Coast as well. But from this map, we can actually tell you that there's a New Zealand student currently studying in each of the 50 states right now, which is pretty incredible. You know, we've got people in Alaska, we've got people in North Dakota, in the middle of nowhere. There's not even many Americans in some of those places, but we've got New Zealand students there, which is pretty cool. So you're always in good company. I wanted to delve a little bit into the higher education system as a whole, because that's one of the trickiest things for people to wrap their heads around. But the U.S. doesn't really have an overall body of education, so nothing like a Ministry of Education exists in America, which means that with all of the 4,700 schools, they could have 4,700 different types of curriculum or different entry requirements, and the school has full reign over how they want to manage those things. So that's how we can kind of help you in that process, the application process. So it is a lot to understand. Other big differences are in the academic year. So Americans start the school year usually in August or September, and then carry through until May. So their summers off are pretty much May through July, and then they'll get back into to start school classes again in August. There's no national entrance examination as well. So some of you have heard about standardized testing, SAT, ACT. We're going to be talking about those things, but those don't guarantee your entrance into a university. So that's one of the big things that's hard for people to understand as well. I also wanted to talk a little bit about accreditation. So even though we don't have a Ministry of Education per se, there is a body that exists just to make sure that the school is the real deal. So kind of protects your rights and your safety for things, and that's what SHIA would do. So most of you would be interested in schools that are fully accredited, and of course there's over 4,700 of them. But if you happen to stumble upon a school that you haven't heard of before, go ahead and check to make sure that it's on the list, just because that will help you out in the long run. So today I'm going to talk to you about the 5 steps to study, which is really a simplified way of understanding how you get from here to the university campus. So starting with researching your options, financing your studies, completing the application, applying for the student visa, and preparing for departure. So really today we're going to focus on the first 2 steps, because that's a lot to understand in its own right. We'll do a separate section on completing the application closer to application season. And the last 2 steps, applying for the visa and preparing for departure, you don't even have to worry about those 2 things until after you've gone through the whole application process. So much further on from now. So we'll just concentrate on researching your options and financing your studies today. So first I wanted to explain the different degree options that are available to students. And maybe some of you have heard of associate's degrees before. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of undergraduate degrees, a bachelor's degree. And really the difference is a 2-year college versus a 4-year college. So in the U.S., the community college system is ever growing, and not a whole lot of people know about it, but it's actually a really great way to start your education. It's becoming more and more recommended for international students because, number one, it's a lot cheaper. So it significantly reduces the fees that you would be paying throughout the career. So say that you start at a 2-year community college, you could end up with your associate's degree, and then you could transfer to a 4-year university and complete the last 2 years of your bachelor's degree. So you wouldn't have to start over with a whole new 4 years. You'd be doing 2 years and 2 years. They call it a 2+2 program, and there's all sorts of pre-existing relationships all across America It's a really, really popular way for students to get their undergraduate degree. In fact, over 40% of American students are currently using that option. It saves them money. The quality of education doesn't really differ. And the reason why I say that it's such a popular option is because in the US, your 4-year degree is really based on 2 years of general education. They call them general electives, gen eds, and then you really delve into your core courses or your major courses for those last 2 years of study. So by getting the general courses out of the way at a community college, you're not hurting yourself at all. And then you get that big degree name at the end of that 4 years. So it's a pretty cool option. And like I said, those relationships exist in every state. So be sure that you look out for those things. We won't cover too much on postgraduate programs today, but just so you are aware, there's master's programs and PhD programs, all sorts of doctoral degrees or professional development things that you can do in the United States as well. Again, that can be a separate topic, but and one of the things for you to remember is that this information is for you, but it may not be for every one of you in this room to study at the undergraduate level in America. There's a lot more funding available for postgraduate programs if that is something that interests you in the future. So do bear that in mind. All right, so this is one of my favorite slides so that you can actually get to see a little bit about a university campus in America. So we have 3 pictures here, and we have a community college, we have a private school, and we have a public school. So we're going to do a little show of hands to see if you guessed them correctly. So, all right, starting with this one here. Raise your hand if you think this is a private school. Raise your hand if you think it's a public school. Raise your hand if you think it's a community college. 1, all right. Okay, so moving on to this one here. Raise your hand if you think it's a private school. Okay, raise your hand if you think it's public. Raise your hand if you think it's a community college. All right, and last one. Private? Public? Community college? All right, I think I've stumped a few of you, so that usually happens, it's okay. All right, so the first one here, this is a public school. So it's actually one of the largest public schools in America. It's Indiana University, which is not the school that I attended, but it is in my home state, and it's pretty lovely, isn't it? So the next one here, it's a private university. So that's Brown. Some of you guessed that was a community college. And this one here, that's your community college, and that's a really well-known one in Southern California. And California in particular has some of the best partnerships in terms of the 2+2 programs. So keep that in mind. All of these universities across America take a lot of pride in their school, and they each have their own distinct personality. So don't judge a book by its cover. Take the time to get to know each university and do your research well so that you can determine if it's going to be the right fit for you. Don't get caught up in rankings, and one of the reasons why I say that is at the undergraduate level, it doesn't matter. There is no official ranking system for undergraduate programs. So a lot of it is, like say, US News and World Report, that's all self-reported. There's a lot of institutions that don't even give the information to be included in those statistics. So don't get bothered with all that information. A lot of it's based on low selectivity or how much money they get from their alumni. None of that stuff actually makes the difference for you at the undergraduate level. So focus more on learning about the institution, if they're going to have the right sort of programs for you in the long run and the right environment for you as a student to thrive in. So how do you actually do this research? How do you narrow the options and find out about schools that maybe you haven't even heard of? Some of the best ways to do that are through search engines, and there's a few of them that I really, really like. College Board, which is actually the company that owns the SAT test, they have a different website called Big Future. You can find it through College Board's website itself, but it's great because they have filters for everything. They have filters for the size of the campus, if it's in a city versus in the country, how many students are in the class, if they offer scholarships for international students, all sorts of things like that. So that's a really good place to start. Peterson's is also a very popular option as well. I would recommend, if you're just beginning your search, try a few different search engines because you'll get different results from each of them, and then start to make a spreadsheet with all of these options together. But first you need to think about what is actually important to you. And there's lots of things that you should consider as part of that process. So one of the most important things for you, I guarantee it, and you may not even think too much about it right now, but it's going to be location. So start thinking about, do you have any family or friends in America? Do you want to be close to them? The U.S. is a very big place, so how accessible is your university going to be from New Zealand, so that you can get to and from as you'll need to? Are you comfortable in a city? Do you want to be in a college town? The U.S. is known for campus life. That's one of the big selling points, is the atmosphere that we touched on at the beginning of the presentation. So if you want to have that experience at the undergraduate level, take these things into consideration now. It's completely different to be a student in a college town versus in a city or even in a place like Wellington. So think about those things ahead of time. The size of the institution can vary quite a lot as well. In the U.S., you can have a university with as few as 500 students and up to 40,000 students. It's quite a big difference. So you've got to think about what sort of setting that you feel confident in, that you can meet people easily, and that you can learn from. So just to kind of spell that out a little bit more, there's usually a big difference between private institutions and public institutions in terms of size. So it's those private institutions that will start at 500 students. That's not very common, by the way. Usually most private schools will have between 3,000 and maybe 7,000 to 10,000 students, and that's for all of the undergraduate programs, all 4 years. And then you have your public schools. A lot of them will start at 15,000 students and go up to your 40,000 student mark. And the student experience can vary quite a lot in that. So you've got to think about your own comfort levels. It's going to be different for everyone. In my experience, I went to a school with 40,000 students, which seems like a whole lot, but once you're actually in your area of study, it feels like a smaller institution. And I can tell you that my freshman year, the first year on campus, I had the Intro to Psychology, Psych 101 class, and it was in a large lecture hall with 500 students in it. 500 students, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for an hour. But I tell you, I loved that because I was the type of student that I was a little bit shy, and I didn't want to be called on all the time, and so in that sort of environment, I actually learned a lot. And I knew that if I had questions about what I was learning, that I could easily go during the professor's office hours, or they'll have extra teaching assistants for classes of that size, so that you can gain extra information if you seek some of that. That same semester, I also had an English class with 20 students in it. So there's quite a variety in experiences, and that was, again, at a large state school. But you can get some private schools that you may have 8 other students in your class, And that's really common. Even at a big state school, you can have that experience. So say you want to get really specific in your field of study. And I was talking to a girl earlier today who really is interested in stem cell research, and she's wanting to get into genetics and molecular biology and all that sort of thing. Well, for her, as she approaches her last 2 years of school in those major core classes, she might be in that situation. Even if it's a big university, she might be in the situation where she has 10 people in her classes. So that can happen. So it's good for people to understand that as well. One of the most important things when you're deciding on schools, making sure they have what you want to study. And bear in mind, that could change. That often does change. For me, it changed. For over 40% of other students, it changes. So don't make sure that they have just one thing that you're interested in. Make sure they have two, so that you can shift your focus if you need to without transferring to another institution. Make it easy on yourself. It also makes you a really well-rounded student as well. So one of the things that like for me, I had a major and I had two minor interests as well. So I studied tourism management and psychology and international business. So lots of different things were happening, but that's pretty common for students nowadays, is that you pick a couple or a few different areas that are of interest to you. It makes you easier to sell yourself in the future when you're seeking work, and it keeps it interesting for you. So more opportunities will come to you that way if you vary your interests a little bit. Campus facilities and athletics are also important things to be considering. Is anyone in here interested in sports? Yeah? Okay, good. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. But so making sure they have the sport that you want to play, as well as the field of study that you're interested in. But even if you don't want to play sport for the university, but you like just goofing off on the side, make sure that they have opportunities for you to do that. So they usually will have club sports available for students. So just double check to make sure that they have that at the schools you're looking for, so you have that outlet. That's really important to the student experience. Special programs in campus life as well. You will learn that you may have a lot more free time than you realize, especially that first semester of school. I see it all the time. For me, I only had classes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday my first year of studying, and so Tuesdays and Thursdays, like, what am I supposed to do? Should I sleep in? Should I study all day? All that sort of stuff. Should I find a job? I was overwhelmed. It was for the first time in my life I had 2 extra days outside of the weekend that I could fill my time with anything I wanted. And that is fantastic freedom and one of your first chances to see how you react in that situation. So how are you going to fill that space? Yes, you do want to make sure you study, but to be honest with you, the average student only studies about 27 hours a week these days. So you still have a lot of extra time there. Make sure you've got an outlet and some hobbies that are of interest to you. And the great thing about U.S. universities is if they don't already have something of interest to you, you can create it. You can make it happen really easily. Take Quidditch, for example. That is a thing now at U.S. universities. I'm not even kidding you. You can play Quidditch at a lot of different schools. They even, will go around and compete in tournaments and for championships and all sorts of things. So, and that was just started by one person who said, I want to make this possible at my school. And then other schools started to hear about it, and all of a sudden, there's this whole tour and a whole different sport that you can play, essentially. So these types of things are possible, and you can create your own academic experience, and I think it's wonderful. Any questions about these things? Okay. So I mentioned before that you should start a spreadsheet. So the one thing that will help you get through this whole process is being organized. So know what you're getting into. As you are as you're going through these search engines and starting to identify schools that are of interest to you, write them down. Write the name of the school, where they're from, what that community is like, the size of the campus, what field of study they offer that you're interested in, all the admissions requirements, deadlines, extra tests involved, any sort of extra requirements that you would need to be aware of, and then put them back to back so you can see what's in front of you really easily. Now, early in the process, you may have 20 to 40 schools. Some of you sports people, I recommend having a list of 40 schools that you're interested in. But when it comes time to the application season, you want to narrow it down to 5 to 7 choices. And we talk a lot about having your reach schools, your target schools, and your safety schools. So having a spreadsheet like this makes it really easy for you to start narrowing your focus a little bit, which is really, really key. So reach schools are schools that are known for being more difficult to get in. You think that you might have a chance, it's your absolute dream to go to that university, but you're also realistic that it's a bit of a stretch. So that's going to be your reach schools. Target schools, you're pretty confident that you're going to get in, but you'd like to see if they could help you out with some financial opportunities. And then your safety schools, where you look at the requirements to get in and you're absolutely confident that you'll get acceptance to those schools. So have a spectrum, have a range of schools when it comes down to it that you apply to, so that you do have options when it comes to making the final decisions. Any questions about this before we move on? Okay. All right, so then it's time to start evaluating your own academic profile. How do you know where you sit in this spectrum? How do you know that your New Zealand education stacks up to US education and education all over the world, so that when you start your first day on campus in America, you know you're in the right place? I have to tell you that New Zealand education is phenomenal, and the US is aware of the great schools in New Zealand, and it is the responsibility of the international admissions person who's reviewing your application to ask questions if they don't necessarily understand your NCEA results. Or how many of you in here are NCEA? Or I'll ask that one first. And is anyone doing IB or anything else? No? Okay. Yeah, so schools are becoming more and more familiar with NCEA, and if you happen to get a school that doesn't quite understand your results, they're going to come to us and ask for clarity behind it. So it's not up to you to prove the worth of your New Zealand education. It's up to the international admissions person to do their job with that. But know that you are on par. You're right where you need to be, as long as you've been doing the right sort of coursework to get to that point. But I will tell you that there's another way that you can kind of narrow your focus to make sure that for the more challenging schools that you would fit in that spectrum, or if you want to be in an easier environment, not easier, but less competitive environment, then an option is standardized testing. So every school in America will list the average results of the ACT and SAT from their admitted students from last year. And that's a good way for you to know where you stand in that whole spectrum out of all the other students that are applying for those particular schools. So who here has heard of the SAT before? Who here has heard of the ACT before? Okay. All right. And has anyone actually taken the SAT exam? One person? Yep. And ACT? Yep. What was your experience like with SAT?
It was really long.
Really long?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It can be a really long test. You are right. Both the SAT and the ACT can be long tests. The first thing I want to tell you before we get too far into it is that, again, these tests will not guarantee you admission into any university in America. So they are not required at all institutions either. In fact, a growing trend is that, for example, University of Arizona, they don't require you to take either the SAT or the ACT because they don't think it's a clear indication of how well you will perform as a student at their campus. But I can tell you that for 75% of schools, they still want you to take one of these tests so that they know where you are in the spectrum. And that's the big reason why. The other thing, why I think it's personally important for you to take these tests, is that it makes you eligible for financial aid opportunities. So oftentimes these initial automatic scholarships decisions are based on standardized testing. So if you perform really, really well on the ACT or the SAT, it can give you some money off, which is pretty fantastic. There's also a little box that you can check if you're signing up online for the SAT or the ACT that says, yes, you can share some of my information with other schools, and other schools may be able to find you in the mix. So it could be, for example, Mississippi State is trying to grow their international student enrollment by 20% in the next 10 years. They may find you based on you saying, they won't see your score, but they'll see that you've taken the SAT or the ACT, so they know you're interested in studying in America, and they know that you're from New Zealand, and they know what you want to study. So they may approach you and say, hey, come to our university. And how are they going to lure you in? With money. That's right. So so it's a good idea to check that box when you're registering for these exams. Now, which one is more popular, which one you should take? To be honest, it doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. We normally recommend the SAT because it's offered more times in New Zealand. So it's a bit easier for students to take that exam. In America nowadays, ACT is the more popular test to take. Whatever test you decide, it won't impact the overall decision for you. How well you perform on it is part of that whole application process. Yes, that's true. The other thing for student athletes is that you have to take either the SAT or the ACT in order to play NCAA Division I sports. So make sure you factor that into your whole timeline as well. Now, how many Year 12 students do we have in here? Okay. And with the rest of you are Year 13? Or anyone Year 11? No? Okay. Great. So Year 12, the thing that you need to know is that the SAT is changing its format. So as of March of next year, it will be a different test. So it's up to you to decide if you want to take the SAT as exists today. You have opportunities to take it in May or June, and they'll be releasing more testing dates, probably October, November timeframe, and then again in January. So you do have opportunities to take it again before the March cutoff, or do you want to take the ACT instead? So the difference is the ACT has a bit of a science reasoning component. SAT is just going to be your reading comprehension, your writing, and your mathematics. So ACT does have the science element involved. So we can talk a lot about that after the session, but I want to make sure that we cover everything that we need to today. So talking about how you're going to afford everything. And I like to lay it out with the average annual tuition and fees for last year, just so you can get an idea of things. So starting...
It's US dollars, isn't it?
Yes, it is US dollars. Starting with the 2-year community colleges, annual tuition fees on average were $7,463. For 4-year public institutions, we're going to look at that out-of-state figure, because that out-of-state and the international student rates are usually pretty similar. The out-of-state figure for that was $18,548. 4-year private institutions, average cost was $31,000. So those are big numbers. You can't deny it. Those can be really big numbers, and those are the numbers that you're going to see on all the information brochures. So think about that, and I'll talk about ways to reduce those costs in a minute. But other things that need to be considered will be just basic living costs. You've got to survive. You've got to eat and sleep somewhere safe when you're in America. Transportation. How are you going to get from New Zealand to wherever you're going in the U.S.? How many times a year do you want to come back to New Zealand? All of those things can add up. Books and other supplies required just to be a student. So think about the total package, the total cost of everything as you are determining if this is an option for you. I have to share this information because it's a good point. So globally, 80% of international students receive their primary source of funding from their families. So that's the global standard. I'll tell you, for New Zealand, that figure looks a lot different. So for most New Zealand families, it's not possible to pay those prices. And so a lot of students that end up going to America are doing it with some sort of financial assistance. So ways that you can find some of these sources of funding. One of my favorite ones is this one right here. So fundingustudy.org. There's also great ones, findaid.org. EducationUSA's website was just revamped a couple weeks ago, and they've got some really great information and scholarships available for international students on that website. So keep looking. You've got to look for these opportunities. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about stacking options and the types of financial aid that are available to you. And the biggest one is going to be scholarships. So let me tell you that internally at U.S. universities, there are 4 different places where you can find funding. Let me preface this, it is extremely rare for any one person to get a full scholarship to a university. So when you hear people talking about getting scholarships to go to the States, bear in mind that a lot of those are partial scholarships. But there's no limit as to how many scholarship opportunities you can stack on top of each other. And the more you seek, the better your chances are of reducing that total cost of tuition. So the 4 places that you can look at are those automatic scholarships. So by taking the standardized testing, that immediately makes you eligible for an automatic scholarship at the university. Then they'll have going like a presidential scholarship, a university-wide scholarship opportunity, and those can be pretty large ones, but those will be very competitive as well. So if you're a very, very good student and very well-rounded and involved in the community and have special interests and that sort of thing, kind of the best of the best, that's who gets those big campus-wide scholarships. So if that's you, then fantastic, let me know. Other places to look will be in the International Student Office. They'll have a separate pot of money for scholarships. Not everywhere. You want to make sure that they do offer the international student scholarships, but in many cases they do, and they'll be really transparent before you even get to the application process if that's going to be an option for you. Another place to look is within the department itself. So the girl I was talking about earlier who's really interested in stem cells, she could go to the biology department and then be up for department scholarships against all the other biology students. So that's a smaller pool of applicants in there as well. So that's just within the university itself. There's a whole lot of external scholarships available as well, but you really have to do the research and put the work in to get those opportunities. They do exist. A lot of them are open to international students, but you do want to double check those requirements. There's some really random ones, and a lot of them are based on diversity. So a lot of women in science opportunities, a lot of maybe religious-based opportunities. One of my favorite ones is actually from David Letterman. So he has a scholarship that he makes available every year for C students because he was a C student, a really average sort of bloke, you know, and he wants to make university experiences open to all other students as well. So every year he gives money away for average students out there. So there's random things like that. You just have to take the time to look for it. The only person who can do it is you. Oftentimes you're going to be required to write an essay in order to get these scholarships. But the thing is, once you start writing these essays, you can usually recycle them a little bit. So be smart about the work that you're putting into it. Take the time to do the research to make sure you're eligible for it. And then just apply, see what you get. Don't stop with that process. A lot of people will also ask me about the opportunity to work on campus. And as an international student, you are allowed to work part-time on campus for up to 20 hours per week, which will not finance your studies, I will say that, but it will give you some spending money, so it might supplement your coffee addiction or buy a few pizzas on the weekend and that sort of thing, but so it will help out. And I also think it's a great way to add to your student experience as well. You'll be meeting new people and contributing to society a little bit. You've got to be working on campus, so a lot of those jobs could be working in a library, working in your residence hall or dining hall, could be in a research lab depending on the situation. So things like that where it's not high pressure work, but it's a great way to meet other people and help get situated on campus. So those are great opportunities. Any questions about that? Okay. So some of you did mention that you're interested in sports scholarships, which is a whole different kettle of fish. So we'll briefly talk on it. But the biggest thing for you to understand is the sports umbrellas. So starting with NCAA, so that's the one that you hear of most often. So NCAA is broken into 3 different divisions. So Division 1 is going to be the best of the best. Division 2 is still very competitive. In fact, probably the bottom half of Division 1 and the top half of Division 2 are almost equal. And you do get actual sports scholarships for both Division 1 and Division 2 sports. Now Division 3 is also a great, if you're interested in playing sport, it still is wonderful, but they don't actually have money allocated for sports scholarships. Instead, they will give you money based on your academic performance and lure you into the school that way. So there still is quite a few opportunities for that. Now NJCAA, that's your associate's programs and all your community colleges as well. They will try to lure you in to play sports at those schools. In fact, we work with a lot of baseball players right now who maybe aren't the best students, but they really want to go to America and get a great education while playing their sport. And so they'll start out at a community college and then transfer to the 4-year institution. And it gives them a chance to get better at their sport. And so by the time, after 2 years, they're ready to perform at a higher level, both on the field and in the classroom. So it is a really good opportunity for them. Another option is NAIA, which is a great sporting conference, but those are smaller schools and they don't have as many sports available. They do have sports scholarships available though, so it is worth looking, and the entry requirements are less strict. The big thing I do want to say about sports scholarships is if this is your goal, if NCAA Division I is your goal, make sure that you've done the right things ahead of time. So make sure you've started really early. Double check. Core courses are incredibly important for NCAA. They want to make sure that you've taken enough science classes and maths classes and English classes during your high school experience and that will help to make you eligible. I will talk to the sports scholarships people afterwards with if you have any more questions about those things like sliding scale and GPA and all those buzzwords as well. So we'll make sure that we take some time for that. But as part of the overall application process, I wanted to make sure that you understand these things. So application for us happens around September time. So September and October are really high months for submitting your application for U.S. universities. And keep in mind the time frame is quite different as well. So for you year 13 people, you would be starting your application in September, October this year. A lot of deadlines will happen 1st of November, 1st of December. Sometimes they carry on into January, but for a lot of the financial aid opportunities, you're going to look to be applying by the 1st of November in most situations. You don't actually find out if you've been admitted to U.S. schools until usually middle of March, sometimes 1st of April. That's the normal time. But the good news is you find out if you've been admitted and if they're going to give you any financial aid at the same time. So that's unless you've been waitlisted, then you don't know if you've actually been given financial aid. So that usually happens around April time, but it does mean for you that you would be finished with your New Zealand school before you actually find out if you've been admitted to a U.S. university. And that is a big risk. We do understand that. There's a lot of other people that are in your situation as well. And people will use that time to maybe defer New Zealand enrollment. It's always smart to have a backup plan in case something happens. And even for you sports people, have a backup plan. There's something called the broken leg test. So what happens if you break your leg before you even get to the university? What are you going to do? Are you still going to be able to attend that school? What's your situation going to look like? So think about all those factors. And people will use the time, that gap between, from December when you're finishing school up until when they would start at the U.S. University campus in August time the following year, to usually work in New Zealand, save a little bit of money. If they're a sports person, maybe do some extra training, or maybe you're lucky enough and you can do a bit of a gap year and travel around a little bit too. So each experience is a little bit different. Got a question?
Yep. If they went off and started and did like a semester at the university here, can that transfer?
That's a great question. So the question was, if they did a semester here at a New Zealand university, could they transfer? The answer is shortly yes, but it's a completely different application process. So the student would not be starting as a freshman necessarily. We do have cases where the student does start at a New Zealand school and just doesn't tell the U.S. university that they've done so, just because it's a completely different. You'd be applying as a transfer student, not as a freshman. So 2 different requirements. And some schools won't take you at all. Some schools just full out won't take transfer students. So you've got to do that research ahead of time and know the situation. Each school is a little bit different in terms of that. My recommendation would be, if possible, to just defer a semester if you possibly can, start a bit later. Yes?
You still have to do the SATs if you do transfer?
So that's a great question. It depends on when in the game you do transfer. So, and again, it's going to be different for every school. In most cases, yes, you probably would still have to take it. Would it be as much of a factor in terms of you getting into that school? Probably not, but they're going to be a lot more interested in how you performed at your New Zealand university. But bear in mind, too, that when you're transferring universities, it's a lot more complicated and not all of your courses may transfer. You also are probably cutting yourself off from a lot of the financial aid opportunities as well. So do your research if you think that's going to be your situation. It's my advice to you. Yeah. Any other questions about that? So we'll talk about the facets of the actual application so that you can get an understanding of that. You're going to need your academic results from the last 4 years of school. So 4 full years, which for some of you, many of you, would mean different institutions. So all the results from the last 4 years. You would need your SAT or ACT results. And if you're registering for those online, those get sent straight to the university of your choice. So it's super easy. You cannot actually submit your own results. It has to be done by the testing agency. You will have to write an essay or personal statement in almost every case. So that is a big component of it. You will need letters of recommendation, always from at least a teacher, but oftentimes from someone in the community or a guidance counselor as well. So start now to identify those people in your life. If you don't have a teacher, start nurturing those relationships now. And when it comes time to asking for these letters of recommendation, make sure that you give them at least 4 weeks to write that letter for you. You don't know what they're going through in their own lives. So give them plenty of time to do it and make their lives easy by handing them some information that you think would be relevant. Talk to them about it. Say, these are the great things that I've done over the last few years. It would be great if you could highlight some of these things in your letter. Things like that, so that it gives you a broader application as well. And we can talk about a lot of those things later on if you'd like. Keep up the good work in the classroom, because your academic performance is going to be the most significant part of the application. But also what you do outside the classroom, the U.S. universities really want to see. They want to know that you're a well-rounded individual and that you're involved in the community or playing a sport or super passionate about something, whatever that may be. So nurture that and have a little bit of fun with it. And then also the financial aid forms are going to be part of the application process itself. So you need to, students in here, you need to get your families on board and give them time to put some information together as well. And that's it. That's the full application process. So it's a lot of, well, not a whole lot of components, but they're pretty chunky and they do take some time and effort for you. So start early when possible. So this is a bit of a timetable, and for most of you, we're in that crackdown mode. So this timeline is kind of working backwards from the first day that you step foot on that U.S. university after you've been accepted. So for a lot of you, we're in this space now where it's really, really pivotal that you're starting to identify what's really important for you and going through that full research process, developing a short list of schools based on your criteria. That's absolutely essential for this stage, and take the rest of your school holidays to really work on this list and do it now. And then make sure that your standardized testing timetable is up to date as well. So if you haven't already registered for the SAT or ACT, but you know you need to do it, tick that off your list. Start studying for it now. And then you don't really need to start thinking about the application until it becomes available. So August, September time is when you need to start thinking about those things. All right, so I've got some my contact details and some online resources for you to consider up here as well. So I'll leave this information available for you, but does anyone have any questions at this stage? Yeah.
So I've heard that like in the States people don't just get straight into things like law degrees. Like I just wondered how that would work.
Yeah, so law's a different beast, and law is a postgraduate degree in America. So that's the first thing that you need to know. And second thing you need to know is it's a different law system altogether. So unless you really want to practice law in America, it wouldn't make sense for you to do that postgraduate degree there unless you're thinking about a specialization, and that would be a Master's of Law. That's an LLM. But if you're thinking about practicing law in New Zealand or anywhere in the Commonwealth, then it may not make sense for you to do a full, what they call it a pre-law degree in America. It may not make sense for you to do that just because it is a different law system.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all.
Just
Oh,
one
yeah.
Is there financial aid for New Zealand students from the US government, or are we not about? Can we not get those?
So financial aid directly from the U.S. government, no. There will be scholarships available sometimes from the U.S. government, small scholarships. But in terms of like a loan, you're probably asking about.
Yeah, because
That doesn't really exist for international students,
So
unfortunately.
financial aid means loan, is that right?
Yes, yeah. Well, financial aid is kind of the overall thing. When you hear U.S. students talking about financial aid, they mean loans, because there's no other way for them, really. Yep. Any other questions? It's all right. We can talk one-on-one afterwards. So thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate your time tonight. I hope you picked up some information in the back. We do a monthly newsletter with just some tips and things. So if you would like to sign up for that, please feel free to do so as well. Just make sure we've got your email address in the back.
Is there a difference in Fulbright?
Yeah, it would be different. Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.